Hi everybody, this is Dr. Nichols-Boyle again. So in this video, I'm going to give you, again, just the overview of the setup to the story and go through the major plot points to make sure that you understand it. And then I will look closely at just two scenes that people usually have some more difficulty with to give you a sense of the way that it sounds, a little bit of the accent and why Carlton has written it this way, the strange language to help kind of convey how that sounds, and a little bit more of looking closely at that language to give you a better idea. So we'll start with the background that I gave you before and the setup that Carlton kind of starts with, which is one, that this is a trickster tale. So Carlton doesn't say that, but we know this from the previous video where the Irish are trying to outwit the more powerful English. And he sets up the story as telling us that there's this battle of the wits between distillers who make whiskey illegally and the gauger who is trying to enforce the law. So Condy Cullen is about 16 years old. We know he's from this family that's done this. They make poaching or Irish potato whiskey, which is similar to moonshine like we would have here, people might make, and at least in the olden days, maybe still sometimes. So very strong and dangerous, like 100% proof. And you were supposed to have a license to make this and sell alcohol and pay taxes with it. But it was expensive, so most Irish would just avoid the law and find a way to make their own without paying the fees. And the gauger, or sometimes called Gauger Stinton, is an Englishman. He works for the English government, or it said his Majesty, Her Majesty, the Queen. Exciseman. An exciseman is a tax collector or an enforcer, primarily concentrates on alcohol violations. As you can guess, Condy would want to steer well clear of him because they're illegally distilling the whiskey. And so we know from the beginning that it's highly unlikely Condy wouldn't know who the gauger was. Gaugers were always notorious for being corrupt and taking bribes and money or usually free alcohol from people who have broken the law, violators, instead of collecting the fines or the fees, so that they wouldn't get, or blackmailing people so they wouldn't get arrested. And an Irish audience would know this. An English audience might want to pretend they didn't know this, but they kind of knew it was going on. And then the other main character is Cartwright, who is an English gentleman, and he's a friend to the gauger, but not a gauger himself. And he's trying to stay impartial during this whole thing because he's just enjoying it's a good sense of humor, and he's just enjoying it. So Carlton sets that all up before he goes into the story proper. And as you're reading it, you should pay close attention to the kinds of language that is being used here to describe Condy and to describe the gauger, so you can see what's going on and how he feels about those characters and give some insight into that relationship. And in addition, it also helps us know more about who we're supposed to kind of side with as readers. So that helps you get an overall view of it, and then we'll go into more of the story itself, starting from the beginning. So after that setup, he goes more into the actual story, and we see these two gentlemen, and it gives us the year around 1827 or 28, and they are riding through a field. They see somebody off in the distance, a boy off in the distance with a keg on his back. So the gauger, of course, says, well, we have to find this person, and they ride off. But they're across a distance, so it takes them a little while to get over there. And by the time they get there, all they see is this boy without any keg. And they think, well, that's odd. So they start questioning this boy, and he's very polite, seems very innocent. Says, God save you, gentlemen. Please, your honor. These kinds of words. And the gauger says, did you see a boy with a gray coat? And he's like, gray coat, a little bit short. Condy says, yeah. So, yeah, I saw him, but I didn't see a boy with a keg. And the gauger says, well, how could he have gotten rid of the keg that fast? I can't quite figure it out. And don't know exactly what's up, but it seems odd that anyone would be able to get rid of a keg that fast. So this boy must know something more. So he's trying to question him, but he's wearing a red coat, and the guy they saw was wearing a gray one, so they can't quite figure it out. And in order to gauger's naturally suspicious, so he offers him money to come closer so he can kind of inspect him better. And Condy supposedly falls for it and comes closer. Won't get quite close enough, and says, let me take off your coat. Let me see you. And he's like, why? I mean, surely I couldn't have hid a K like on my person. That doesn't make sense. So he does get close enough, and the Gauger grabs him and then realizes, aha, he's got a reversible coat, which is Condy's trick, and one of the tricks he's learned. And he threatens, he's like, I've straightened and stretched your neck yet, my cherub, my angel. Like, hang you, right? So this kind of idea, says, I caught him. So Condy knows he's found out. And we can kind of guess for ourselves, along the way, there's a lot of room for interpretation. Did Condy really not know about this and come closer? Or did he come closer to try to get the money anyway, knowing that he's caught and doesn't have any real will to escape? So, this is where we're at. And then Condy, knowing he's caught, says, well, I lost it. I don't know where it went. Can't find the keg, which seems ridiculous because it's only been a few minutes. There's only so far he could have gone. So the Gauger said, come on, let's look at you. And Condy's pretending to look around for it. And the Gauger is getting frustrated. Condy kind of makes a joke to throw him off. And then Cartwright starts laughing. And it seems clear that Cartwright has seen the keg, but he says he's not going to say anything. He won't say why he's laughing. So Condy makes sure not to look where the keg is, but Cartwright isn't quite so clever. So he's looking where the keg is. Stitton figures it out and finds the keg. And it turns out that Condy has just pushed it behind a hedge or a bush there and tried just enough time to, because he didn't have any other choice, to run out from behind it and switch out his coat and pretend he hadn't seen it. So Carlton tells us all this, and we also know that, well, this is because he's quick on his feet and he's being clever about it. And we don't know exactly, you can only see it, say, from a certain angle. So he's found, he's caught out. So when he's questioned, though, he says, the Gauger says, who are you? And he says, well, Barney Kerrigan's my name. Of the Kerrigan family, I'm not ashamed of it. And you think, well, why is he giving a false name? Because we know his name is Condy Cullen, right? And he said, well, where were you bringing it to? Condy says, I was bringing the keg to Gauger Stitton, but better man than you anyway. And Gauger says, well, why? Who sent this keg to Stitton? Why were you doing that? He says, oh, I won't tell you. I'm not going to be an informer, a traitor. And so the Gauger thinks, he must be on the up and up. I know the Kerrigans. We find out a little later, says, they always send me a keg around this time of year, so he's clearly been taking a bribe from them every year. They're also distillers of this poaching. So he says, surprise, I'm Gauger Stitton. And Condy seems shocked and says, oh my gosh, I didn't know this. Wow, that's amazing. I found the right person, kind of thing. I was just going to bring this to you. And he says, well, didn't you know me? He says, oh, no, I've never seen him. I was just told to bring this to you. So the Gauger says, great, well, I'm the one you're bringing it to, and now here's what I'm going to do. So Condy's figured out a way to kind of keep the keg, right? He said, here, I'll give you, the Gauger says, I'm going to give you a key, my key to my cellar, where he keeps all his kegs, and you tell my daughter that you're there to deliver the keg. She'll know I sent you because you have the key, and she'll even give you your breakfast. Condy says, great, I suppose I should do that. He seems kind of down about it, and the Gauger says, well, what's wrong with you? He says, well, that's kind of a lot of trouble. And all this trouble I'm going to only to get is my breakfast. So he says, well, okay, well, here you go. You can have this half a crown, this money as well, which Condy, of course, knows he has because he bribed him with it earlier to come closer. So Condy says, great, and off he goes. And by the looks of it, he's going to get away with getting the keg, maybe some breakfast, and some money. So this is looking pretty good. How is this going to work? In the meantime, as he's walking away, Cartwright says, I'm not sure that I fully trust this guy. He's supposed to stay out of it. And Sid says, no, I expected something from the Kerrigans. This makes sense. And, but maybe we shouldn't fully trust him. So they're kind of debating. And as Condy's walking away, he says, I'm not sure if they fully trust me. And he's kind of realizing this too. So he says, and if they follow me, I'm in trouble and everything's going to come out. So maybe I should do one more thing to have them not suspect me fully. So he turns around and he goes back to them. And he says, hey, by the way, before I go, how do I know you're really the gauger and not just somebody pretending to be the gauger so they can keep the keg for themselves? And he says, the gauger laughs and says, well, if you're suspicious, couldn't you just go into town and ask someone where Gauger Stinton lives, and then you would know for sure? And Condy says, oh, yeah, that's sure. That's a great idea, of course. That makes sense. Off I go. So with that, the gauger and Cartwright think, well, he would never have come back if he was really a thief, if it was really him, if he wasn't who he said he was, because he'd already gotten away with it. He was off. So this makes sense. We fully trust him now, and that's that. Then cut to the end of the story, where the gauger and Stinton, or the gauger and Cartwright, are coming home to the gauger's house, and they go to say to the daughter, he says, can you bring out the keg? We're going to have a party. And she says, what keg is that, Father? I don't know what you're talking about. He says, well, the keg what the boy brought back. He says, I don't know. There was no boy brought a keg. This is the one who I gave my key to. He had my key. And she says, oh, well, no, a boy did come with a key. But he said that you told him to take a keg. So I gave him the keg and I gave him his breakfast and off he went. And they realize what's happened. So he has switched the story. He's used that key to get the keg instead, to get another keg instead, gotten his breakfast. So in the end, as he was on his way to the gaugers, he drops the keg off somewhere safe, maybe at his house or somewhere else, so that he can keep it. He knows he hasn't really gotten the Kerrigans in trouble because they'll figure out that it wasn't the Kerrigans. So he's saved that there. And in the meantime, he gets another keg and his breakfast and money. So he walks away with 2 kegs, his money, and breakfast, instead of what he was supposed to have done, which is deliver this keg. So Condy wins the Battle of the Wits. The gauger and Stinton and Cartwright, gauger Stinton and Cartwright, laugh and say, oh, he got us, and drink his health. Now, that does seems like a bit of a strange reaction to somebody who's just got one over on them. But you might think about that this is a bit of a maybe rebellious story in a way that could be read on those kind of 2 levels. If you think about that hidden transcript in the private and the public that we talked about before, and that Carlton is writing for an English audience. So consider that when you're thinking about whose side he's on or how he's telling this story as well. So that gives you what happened. Hopefully that clears up any confusion that you had. And if you feel strongly enough there, you can end here. Otherwise, I'll just spend a few quick minutes going over those few scenes to show you a little bit more how it sounds and what it's about. So those few scenes I've pulled up here. The first one is where Condy is trying to distract him and they're looking for the keg, and he says something about not knowing his left hand from his right. So the gauger says, well, whichever way he goes, we'll go the opposite way because we know he's trying to mislead us about where this keg is. So Condy, he says, I say, my boy, Eston, don't you look rather foolish now? Can you tell your right hand from your left? Like, how could you not know where it is? And Condy says, yeah, I can tell my right hand from my left. I can. There's my right hand. And he holds up his left hand. So he seems like he doesn't. He seems like an idiot. And Cartwright says, well, what do you call the other? It's my left bedad anyhow, and that's sure enough. True enough. Both gentlemen laugh heartily, and the gauger says, but it's carrying the thing a little too far. In the meantime, let us hear how you prove it. And Condy says, easy enough, sir, easy enough. Because I am left-handed, this, holding up his left, is the right hand to me, whatever you may say to the contrary. So he's used a bit of a play on words here. He's saying, basically, I'm left-handed, so this is, my left hand is the hand I write with, W-R-I-T-E. So that is my right, W-R-I-G-H-T, play on words, my right hand, my correct hand, because I write with my left hand, right? So he does really know the difference between his left and his right hand. And he shows this here, and he's kind of cleverly got one over on them and showed he's smarter than he thinks. But he just kind of grins like he's an idiot. He's into a grin so broad and full of grotesque sarcasm, so we know that he knows. And they're not quite sure how to react. So that's that quote I was mentioning before. Stinton and his companion both found their faces, in spite of them, get rather blank under its influences. So think about why they reacted that way. Are they confused? Does he really know what he's saying? Is he smarter than he looks? Or is it that they do know this, but they can't quite give him credit for being clever, because then that would make their superior attitude and place in society a little bit suspect. So they just pretend not to understand that. Anyway, that one's up to you, but that's kind of the idea here. And then the Gator just changes it. The subject says, "What the deuce? Are to be here all day? Come, sir, bring us at once to the keg." Get back to that idea. So that's one that people get a little bit confused about, and that's on page 142. And then the other scene I wanted to look more closely at is where Condy turns back, and that's on page 145. So that's a little bit further down. Okay, and again, he suspects that the Englishmen suspect him, so he is about to turn back, and we hear for the first time his own thoughts, not speaking to them, but speaking to himself. And this is when people are often confused by this paragraph here, page 145, because the accent is a little bit thicker. It's kind of harder to understand, and this is on purpose. So Carlton kind of wants to show how it's different when he talks to himself than when he talks to somebody else. This and his superior. So that's that difference of that kind of private and public transcript, maybe. So here he is talking to himself, and he says, "Bad cess forever attend you, Sitting Agra," he exclaimed, "for there's surely something over you, a lucky shot from behind a hedge, or a breakneck fall down a cliff, or something of that kind. If the old boy hadn't his crubs hard and fast in you, you wouldn't let me walk away with the whiskey anyhow. But, Dad, it's well I thought of the Kerrigans, for sure enough I did hear Barney say that he was to send a keg into him this week, some day, and he didn't think I knew him either. Faix, it's many a long day since I knew the sharp puss of him, with an eye like a hawk. But what if they follow me and do up all? Anyway, I'll prevent them from having suspicion on me before I go a toe farther, the ugly rips." Okay, so what does this mean? So I'll translate this kind of section for you, and then you'll see a little bit more about how Condy really feels. So we had this "bad cess forever attend you, Sitting Agra," bad luck be with you forever. Agra is Irish for dear, so he's being sarcastic, bad luck for you, dear. For surely, I hope for these kinds of things for you, someone to shoot you from behind a hedge, or maybe if you break your neck behind down a cliff, or something like that. And if the old boy, the devil, didn't have his claws in you, you wouldn't let me walk away with whiskey anyhow, because you're corrupt, you're an evil person. So he says, and yeah, it's a good thing I thought of the Kerrigans, because I ran into Barney earlier, and he said he was to send the Gager a keg this week, and the Gager, this is the he here, the Gager didn't think I knew him, and he says, "God, what an idiot! Of course I know him. I'm a little distiller. So fakes or faith, it's many a day since I knew the sharp puss or face of him, with an eye like a hawk." And then he says, "Well, what if they follow me and they do up all, they ruin everything? So I'll prevent them from having suspicion on me before I go a toe farther, before I go any farther. The ugly rips, or the absolute jerks, So it far from gentlemen anymore. He's calling them rips. He's wanting the Gager to get shot or fall down a cliff. And this is kind of his true voice. And it's a small part, but if you look closely, you can kind of see how Carlton is giving us an idea of some might say duplicity of the Irish, or the way that they, I would say, are able to quickly change their character for different situations. And again, we can think more about why that is and what it means, but this gives you a couple of those more difficult passages, which generally you should look at any difficult passages, because that's usually where the good stuff is. Okay, I hope that helps, and that you enjoyed the story, maybe even a little more after knowing more about it.